Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. Today, we're going to be discussing innovation, trends, and awards, not just in chocolate, but in the specialty gourmet food industry in general. And we'll start the talk right after we come back from the intro. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Chocolate Life Live. Today, we're going to be talking about innovation, trends, and awards, and the occasion is the Fancy Food Show. The Fancy Food Show is returning to New York City for the first time since the summer of 2019. 2020, 2021 didn't happen because of the pandemic. There was a winter fancy food show in Las Vegas this year, but I was not able to travel and attend. So this represents something of a homecoming for me. And it's been sort of a lodestone for me in many, many respects, or a lone star, perhaps. I remember my first ever summer fancy food show. It was in 2001. In June, it was about a month after I launched chocophile.com. So it was just after I debuted my career as a professional chocolate critic. And there I had a chance to meet with Frederick Schilling, who was the founder of To Go. It was his first fancy food show as well, but was also the first time I had a chance to meet with Gary Guittard. Now, it is a name that I was familiar with, but I had never met anybody for the family. They were exhibiting at the fancy food show, and I had a chance to explain to Gary for the first time what it was that I was trying to do in my career as a chocolate critic, and engage with him to be able to try to enlist his support in helping me to understand a segment of the chocolate industry that I didn't know much about. And I went to virtually every fancy food show, a summer fancy food show between 2001 and 2019. The Winter Fancy Food Show, which happened in San Francisco until this most recent one, I probably attended more than 50% of the time between 2001 and 2019. Perhaps surprisingly to some, but perhaps surprisingly not, they are different shows. The show here on the East Coast is got a tighter focus on Europe, and the show on the West Coast has got a broader focus on the Asia Pacific markets and bringing foods from those cultures in the United States. There is a lot of overlap in terms of who the exhibitors are from show to show and from year to year. But the most important thing for me is when you're trying to spot trends or you're trying to understand what's going on, is to be able to have regular contact with the exhibitors. Hundreds of them, sometimes maybe even 1,000 or more exhibitors. And then to be able to see how many different exhibitors there are in different categories from year to year. And so, for example, you might see that tea is trending and then it sort of disappears. Jerky is trending, or jerked meats are trending. And then they might disappear. Ginger as a flavor might be trending and then it will disappear. And this is what you get from going to both shows consistently over a long period of time. You get this background of, okay, this is what it is that's going on. And how can I see the differences from one show to the next show in order to be able to figure out what are the trends, what is it that people think is new, or what appears to be hot. And what's important about the Fancy Food Show is that it does bring food manufacturing companies from all over the world to one place for a very short period of time. This year, it's Sunday the 12th, Monday the 13th, and Tuesday the 14th. At Javits Center in New York City. And events have already started. There's an olive oil tasting I'm going to be doing this evening. There's an event for DOP, San Marzano tomatoes on Monday evening that I will be joining. All sorts of events. And so for me, in trying to understand what's going on in my category, chocolate, right, and chocolate confectionery, and how flavor trends in one area of the specialty foods industry might be affecting flavor trends in other areas of the specialty foods industry. So seeing crossovers, how they exist, how they don't look, is been quite important for me in terms of understanding and looking at the future. So if you're watching today, no matter whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, you can go into the comments. If you've got questions, please put them in there. If you do have comments, just want to let me know where you're connecting from today. Just put it in the comments and I can get it up on screen and talk about those things. So the first thing I want to talk about is actually to start off with the Specialty Foods Association itself. So let's go to their homepage and let's get it up on the screen. So the Specialty Foods Association is the organization that puts together the specialty of the fancy food shows. And it is broadly representative of the specialty/gourmet foods industry around the country. What is interesting for me in terms of today's discussion are a couple of things. Number one is that every year they publish a list of trends, right? So this is what the Specialty Food Association think is going to be trending for 2022. These are not just trends, but they are the hot trends for 2022, right? And we see pasta is making a comeback, or they say that pasta will be making a comeback after years of keto and low carb diets. I think people are just saying, okay, I need comfort food, and it's not just wheat-based pasta, semolina-based pasta. It's all about alternative grain pastas as well. But pasta, expect more pasta, right? Plant-based comfort foods. So again, going on with this theme of pasta making a comeback, things are looking for comfort foods. But what we're doing is we're seeing a trend of non-meat, so vegan, vegetarian friendly things. This is what we should be seeing in 2022, more plant-based. And sometimes I have a problem with this language sometimes. Plant-based chocolate. Yeah, chocolate is plant-based. Sort of naturally plant-based. I'm trying to think of the ingredients which aren't plant-based, and how does that work? So there's a bit of redundancy there I have a problem with in terms of marketing language. Worldwide snacking. So what this means is that we're going to be seeing snacks which are from other cultures are going to be introduced to Americans. Some of these will catch on, some of these won't. That's the nature of things. But for some reason, also in here, we have things like prebiotic fibers, right? But keto friendly is also in here for some reason. I don't know what that has to do with wide world. Oh, it's wide world of snacking, not worldwide snacking. So that's why. Okay, so snacking as a category is going to be much more important. Snacking is never not important. So we'll see what that means in terms of that. Peppers are hot. I'm trying to imagine when spicy foods have not been an important trend. I always see them. There are some stalwarts of the industry, like Dave's Insanity. I think I've seen Dave at every single fancy food show I've ever been to. I was, for those of you who may not know, before I got into the world of chocolate, I was a fan of hot sauce. I met the owners of, I think was the first online hot sauce store, Hot, back in 1993, 1994 when I was living in Pasadena. So I've always been a fan of hot peppers. And I think the question here is we're going to be looking at hot peppers, perhaps in places we've never seen them before. Right? So that could be interesting. And then the whole idea of functional foods is going to continue. We're looking for things which are going to improve immune health, right? Those all make sense. And then things that have been, from last year, lower waste, more work in terms of alcoholic beverages, cocktails, and then twists on chocolate classics. And the reason why I think trends are really, really important to follow is, among other things, that the Specialty Food Association puts together something every year they call the Sophie Awards. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a look and see how what they identified as trends prior to award winning, handing out the awards, what is the overlap between what they saw as trending and what they chose to give awards to. And again, this is important to me. I'm going to be attending the Fancy Food Show on Sunday and Monday this year. I'm going to be back here in front of the camera on Tuesday telling you what it is that I saw. So this is the way I'm thinking about organizing what it is that I'm looking for, how it is that I'm looking for things that might be trending, and what could be relevant to the world of chocolate and chocolate confections while I am there. So this is the first time that I've done this kind of exploration in conjunction with the show app, and it's been a lot of fun. I've been identifying companies that I want to go see, questions that I want to go ask. And it's much more directed than it has been in previous years, which has just been about starting in one corner of one hall and then walking up and down every single aisle. I mean, I've learned over the course of many years that the first day of any show is to be fairly ruthless. Don't get sidetracked. Just start at one end of the hall, walk down every aisle, make sure you don't miss everything, sort of identify what it is that you'd like to go see. And then the next day, come back and go see the things that you identified. And so this year is going to be a little modified hybrid of that approach. And if any of you are going to be at the Fancy Food Show, let me know in the comments. Perhaps we can arrange to meet up on Sunday or Monday while I'm there. It would be fun, especially if I've never met you before. I think it'd be great. So 2021s, they're talking about cocktails. We can see that there's more of a cocktail. They're continuing in the cocktail focus. We see snacks, I suppose, could be part of this. Cheese, right? Cheese is I think by far the number one category of food offering at the Fancy Food Show consistently over the course of the 20 years that I've been going there. There's more cheese than anything else in here, and products that support cheese consumption. So yes, we got a lot of cheese here. For those people who are gluten-free, so my daughter is in a family situation, lots of gluten-free stuff. Ooh, so chocolate gluten-free pastry crust. That's a nice idea. I'm going to go by there, and just number one, I just want to see how a gluten-free chocolate brownie pie crust tastes like, what it tastes like. We've got in baking mixes with functional ingredients, I think there's nothing here that I'm particularly interested in. But now we get to barbecue sauce. And I think what's really interesting about barbecue sauce is that both of the winners in this category, so there's a gold and a new product innovation for each one of these categories, is they're both Asian in influence. So one is a Korean gochujang, and the other one is a Japanese influenced. So I think it's interesting that when we talk about flavor influences, number one, they talked about peppers being hot. So obviously that's an interesting thing, but these are very, very atypical for barbecue sauce flavors. Interesting incorporation of non-conventional, there's no hickory smoke or anything in these things. So fermented deep spicy flavors, so I think this is not related to chocolate at all, but I think it is interesting, and I am therefore going to be looking, as a part of what it is that I'm doing, looking to see how these kinds of flavors make their way into other products where I don't think that they are quite as common and conventional as we've been saying. So that's what this says to me. I'm not a keto diet fan, but I'm careful about carb consumption in general. So I'm going to be staying away from beans and grains and rice and breads. From a flavor perspective, I'm looking at seeing what kind of flavors they're putting in here. Nothing seems to me to be perhaps really, really innovative in any kind of way. Although I think a smoked rice could be. Turmeric rice is very, very common in Indian cooking, so I don't know that there's much there to be new. Bagels, not there. Breakfast foods, cereals and granolas, again, a cheese number one category. So stracciatella, Pareggio, these are very, very common cheese. So non-cow's milk cheese. I mean, don't think that because I'm walking past this, or I'm breezing past this now, that I am not going to be consuming mass amounts of cheeses over the course of the time that I'm at the Fancy Food Show. It's a fabulous category. I love cheeses, and there are cheeses here that I would not normally have an opportunity to go and purchase, because in the part of Brooklyn that I live in, there is not a big interest in gourmet cheese. I don't think there's a gourmet cheese store anywhere near where it is that I am, I might have to go into downtown Brooklyn or even to Manhattan to find a specialty cheese store. And so, yeah, no. I know that I could probably do it in Williamsburg, so Bedford cheese, but that's quite a hike from Coney Island to get there. Anyway, I will be eating a lot of cheese over the course of the last couple of days. I love a good fresh goat cheese. I also am a big fan of aged cheeses. Not so much runny, smelly, like an Apoise. Yeah, been there, not a big fan. So chips and pretzels, so toffee and popcorn. So it's also important to know that these products are entered for consideration. So this is not just people going around and looking at members and what is they're doing. These are the companies enter these products into the awards. And so this represents the best of what was entered. So very, very important. So interesting chocolate, Askinosie chocolate, they're barrel aged. I believe it's a bourbon barrel aged dark chocolate. Number one. I don't think Askinosie is exhibiting this year. They're not going to be here. I saw an announcement for this. So I'm going to see if I can get a chance to taste it and share it with you. Seattle Chocolate, J. Coco. They're doing a single varietal, not just a single origin, but a single varietal. This is a bar Contamina. They're going to be there. I'm going to have a chance to meet with them. I'll give a chance to taste this. Perhaps I can bring back a bar and we'll taste it when I come back on when I come back on Tuesday. Interestingly enough, so Bixby is a small chocolate maker that's up in Maine. They're doing work bean to bar, and they did really, really well this year for a single company. I think I see more product wins from Bixby, either gold or new products, than any other single company in all of the categories that are here. So in that respect, really, really cool, deserved work. I've seen progress that they've made over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. I first met them at a PMCA conference, I'm going to think in Cleveland, may have been before then. And so, to Kate and team, great work. Hope you see this and you're involved. But creme brulee, white chocolate, interesting, right? So it's also important, 2 categories, dark chocolate, milk and white, they're put together. And this particular bar appears to have won both the gold and the new product awards. They're both white chocolate. So, and obviously, as you can see, they did well at the Good Food Awards this year. So I'm looking for, I don't think Bixby is an exhibitor, but I'm going to see if I can get an opportunity to talk with Kate and have her share it. We get down here into chocolate candy. So I take that back. Scamps as a company is represented, I think represented in a couple of different areas. I might have also seen them 3 times. So congratulations to them. Carrot cake, Chihuahua chocolatier, Michael Antonorsi. People who may not know Michael, Chihuahua has been around for a very long time, based in Southern California, and have been working in making confections primarily. And then maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago, they switched course from relatively short shelf life, sort of shell molded focus work into deposited bars with inclusions. And they've done really, really well with deposited bars and inclusions. And where they have done well, I think, is to be able to take flavors and textures that are common in other contexts and add them into chocolate. So I don't necessarily know that carrot cake is innovative in any particular kind of way. They did win best new product in this category, but it's not necessarily a flavor combination that you would see regularly. So carrot cake in chocolate. Now, I want to see if it's just, I haven't seen the back of this. Hopefully they will be there. I'll get a chance to see them. But I want to see if there are inclusions in this and whether or not it's just the flavorings that I would associate with the chocolate. Is there icing in here? All sorts of possibilities. I would love to be able to see that's there. Coffee and hot cocoa. So this is one that I think is really, really interesting. So Uganda Bududa Bukalasi by a coffee company in terms of hot coffee and hot cocoa. Really interesting to think about. Salsa matcha. So it's important. The salsa matcha is not green tea matcha, and I'm familiar with salsa macho out of Tabasco, Mexico. And this is a chili in oil base, so it's more like a chili crunch than it is a tomato-based salsa, I think. I'm interested in going and tasting it so that, I get this understanding, oh, we got, hot sauce, hot peppers, and here's a new flavor profile that I'm going to go and see. Non-chocolate confectionery, this company here, Beckett, has been around for, 15 years or more. And their work is spectacular. If you like salted caramels and you do not know this company, you should. I can highly recommend their work. Just because, I've been to France. I've had a chance to try the caramel beurre salé of the company who invented Henri Leroux. Or he trademarked it. I don't necessarily know that he invented, but he trademarked caramel beurre salé, and just fabulous work. So if you like salted caramels, these are absolutely amazing. Here we see Bixby again in another category. So it's a beer brittle with white chocolate on it. Again, it's an entirely different category of product, and this is the third award that they've won, 2 of them in terms of new products. Just really quite a wonderful introduction. Again, I'm looking for clues into how the products that the SFA has sought to give awards to, right? How it matches what they talk about when they talk about trends. And so is there an internal consistency in terms of what's going on? And are there any clues that I can get in terms of what I think of as trends? It's going to be hard for me because there's been this 3-year gap. And so normally what I have to go is it's only 6 months. I can go back and say, how is this different for what I remember it being 6 months ago? So it's going to be a little harder for me this time in order to be able to make those connections. Cookies, Levan Bakery here in New York. They're quite a lovely company. Interested in seeing how their sort of shelf ready to eat, or shelf stable product, which is going into food service distribution, how it resembles what it is that you can walk into the bakery and get, how it might be different. Again, I'm not going to be working crackers and crisp beds this year. There's nothing about the flavors here that make me think about anything. Here we are, Scamps again. I think this is the 3rd time they've shown up, 3 different categories. So that's interesting to see. And so, but they're toffee, so I know what it is they're doing. Here's a new company, Sunday Night, and they're on my list to see for another reason than these particular products. But I'm going to go in there and talk to them when I go see them. Entrees and lunches. This show is also great if you like charcuterie, if you like Italian antipasto. There are whole categories where you can spend 3 days just sampling and grazing and just getting deep into the minutia of, this kind of caper versus that kind of caper versus another kind of caper, for example. So if you're deep into these kinds of things, the show is a lot of fun to be able to have a chance to go see. So fruit, there's nothing here in terms of flavors that I see in fruit jellies and fruits and jellies and jams. There's no new flavor here that I can think is going to be interesting. I'm a big date fan, and dates and chocolate are just a really, really interesting combination. I don't necessarily know that a packaged date like this is something that's going to be interesting to me. I'm more interested in date paste, date syrup, date powder, things which can be incorporated as an inclusions or ingredients into chocolate, or a date paste and chocolate, and putting those two together in the right ratio, and then using it. Anyway, so it's a really, really interesting combination. Functional beverages, is something they've talked about. I don't necessarily know. Blueberry rose geranium, there's nothing new in that combination. Hot sauces in general, lemon garlic peri peri. Okay, cosmic dumpling, I have no idea what the flavor behind that. The jerk category, right, is huge. Nisquets is usually known for bacon. Biltong is from South Africa. These are not new in terms of categories. Biltong has been around as a huge category with lots of exhibitors for 4 to 5 years or more. So the category is expanding. Juices and beverages. Again, I don't necessarily know that there's anything here from a flavor perspective that gives me any sense of anything new. Black truffles, right? Salamis. Olive oil is another huge category, or oils in general. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of companies. I'm going to a Spanish olive oil tasting this evening, as a matter of fact. And I will, hopefully I'll have a chance to bring something back and talk with you about it on Tuesday. Nut seed and confectionery butters, hazelnut cream, nothing new there. Fig, walnut, macaroon, almond butter. So macaroon, in this particular case, is going to be coconut. And so fig and walnut, so I can understand each one of these combinations, fig and walnut together, walnut and coconut together, fig and coconut, by walnut and almond. Interesting combination. Hadn't quite thought about that way. But I think it's a really, really interesting flavor combination. I'm gonna make a point of going to the stand and having an opportunity to try the combination, just because I think it's such an unusual combination of things. Olive oil. There is a big overlap in terms of unflavored and flavored olive oil. So we have a mandarin infused olive oil as a new product, what appears to be a very, very traditional DOP from Umbria here as the winner. Cultured butter, anybody who doesn't like cultured butter, right? Then this is a compound butter with basil a pesto in it. Interesting, again, maybe new in butter, but compound butters are things that chefs have been doing for a long time. Pasta and noodles, pickles and olives. Fermented stuff is also another huge category. So in the beverage category, kombucha has been huge for the last dozen years or so, and kimchi and things like that have also been very big. Rick's Picks is a New York City company, has been huge in this area as well. And so I'm a big fan. And one of the things that I love about the fermented foods category is that I can spend 3 or 4 hours, tasting all these other foods, and then I can go to someplace and have something like this, and believe it or not, settle my stomach. For many, many years, there was a company producing a digestif, Underberg, and they used to have a stand where they have minis. And you could walk up to the stand and they'd hand you a mini. So after 3 or 4 hours of chocolate, right, and eating nothing but chocolate and tasting nothing but chocolate, going to a stand and getting a digestif and being able to settle your stomach and soothe your throat was always a good thing. So this is a category, again, that I like. I don't know how much innovation I'm seeing in here. We have a pickled cauliflower. Cool. Other dairies, so plant-based dairies, plant-based proteins, huge category, and we'll talk about that as well. Salsas and dips. The salsa category is one that's really interesting. For many years, it seemed like everybody had a grandmother, an abuelita who had a fabulous salsa recipe. And so for many years, you would see dozens of companies doing quote unquote Mexican style salsas every year, just bang, bang, bang. Very few of them were able to break through and have any longevity in the marketplace. So again, an Indian fusion salsa, it's interesting. Indian food is very, very hot. Generally not a whole lot of tomatoes in at least in the sauces that I'm aware of. They're sometimes in the bases. So it'll be interesting to see how those combinations are done. If it catches my eye as I walk past, I will go and take it, but I don't necessarily know that I will seek it out. Here's another company, this company called Waz. I think this is the third time we've seen them. Chermoula is actually a flavor that I really, really love. So I would go there just because how does it match my expectations of what a chermoula is supposed to taste like? How well does my memory of it stack up? How does this fit into my idea? So I think that one of the things which is really important if you're going to be a good chocolate taster is you have to be Catholic in terms of your tasting, and Catholic in terms of its original meaning, which means universal. If you've never had the opportunity, or if you've never made the opportunity to taste something, then you don't have a flavor reference for it. You don't have the experience of it yourself personally. And so so if you run across that flavor in a chocolate or in something else, you're not going to be able to identify it. You're going to go, I don't know what this is, right? And maybe it remind you of some other things because of some ingredients. So you might pick up, there is some chili pepper in here, or, oh, there is some rosemary, or there's some other herb in it that you might be able to recognize, but you won't be able to recognize the combination of things. And so I think that one of the great opportunities, even if you never plan to buy, even if you never plan to go in distribution, but to walk through a show like this and get the opportunity to taste things you'd never have an opportunity to taste anywhere else, so that you can create a flavor reference. You have a tasting diary. You can write down what it is you tasted and your impressions of the flavors that you encountered in it. It's just a really, really great way to think about using a show like this. Sometimes you can have nearly unlimited tastings of caviar and things like that. That's always fun. Seasoning, as you can see, this is mind-boggling. This is just the categories of things that are available, right, in the fancy food show every year. And so bang, all right, here are just all of these things. So this has always been an interesting category for me. So the notion of balsamic vinegars, or in this case, I think in the case of dark chocolate balsamic, what the Italians would call a condimento rather than a balsamic vinegar. And by the way, this is something that you can make at home, right? If you would like to make a dark chocolate balsamic vinegar, it's really, really simple. Go to a big box store and get some really cheap balsamic vinegar. And by really cheap, it's not going to be real balsamic vinegar, right? It's not going to be have a denomination. There is AID, which is the Balsamic Vinegar Consortium. But I remember last time I went to a big box store, a brand which is very common, you could buy for about $3 a liter. Really, really inexpensive. But if you take that, add some sugar, and then a high-fat Dutch cocoa powder, and then you reduce this to the thickness that you want, so it wants to coat the back of a spoon, right? So get something which is thick. Then you can create your own chocolate balsamic, cocoa balsamic sauce. Really, really good. So while it's really, really good. And then there are lots of things you can do with that base recipe. And this is sort of where going to the fancy food show is great for inspiration for things. So you could, as you're reducing this condimento, if you were to put cinnamon sticks in it, you would have something that would be cinnamon, chocolate and cinnamon flavored. And this is great if you want to do a drizzle over something like strawberries. Just really, really lovely. And other kinds of fruit and ice creams and sorbets. So just really, really lovely. I used to do a dessert that I would create a la minute for food festivals. And I would take fresh strawberries, and put them on a mandolin and slice them into matchsticks, and then macerate them in a dark chocolate balsamic that I had created, this condimento that I had created, and then put spoonfuls of these macerated strawberries into these cups, and then grate some fresh black pepper over the top. And it's one of those things. I've had strawberries and black pepper before. I've had strawberries and chocolate before, and strawberries and chocolate and black pepper and vinegar drizzle. All of this makes sense, right, in terms of putting together. And so this is where I think that one of the most interesting things that I get out of a show like this comes. Wellness bars and gels, I don't care. Yogurt and kefir. But it's interesting that in the yogurt and kefir category, the number one product was a snacking chip. Interesting. Anybody can go to this page. I think it's quite interesting. And anybody can go to this page. I will put the links on today's post for The Chocolate Life. I think one of the things that's interesting here is in the middle of this description of what the trends are. They talk about craft food rides the waves to popularity. This is on another website. And what do they mean by craft? Because I'm going to be speaking at Chocoa in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about expanding the market for craft chocolate. And one of the challenges the craft chocolate market has is it doesn't know how to define craft. And if the craft chocolate makers are confused about what craft chocolate is, it's no wonder that the market is confused. And so in this particular case, they say no one way to describe it. Absolutely. Every customer and expert has a different idea. That's one of the challenges to overcome. What most agree is that it fits on a fine line between tradition and innovation. And I have never thought about it that way. Craft is a fine line between tradition and innovation. Not the way I'd ever thought of it before, but it's interesting to have that take on it. It says that most foods and beverages referred to a craft are handmade. That's not true, right? I can put a craft chocolate into a universal refiner or a ball mill. It's not craft at that point. And many are made with natural ingredients. Okay. What that suggests is that they are not made by companies who are focused on long shelf life and distribution. So that may be a good way to think about it. But it also suggests they're made in a simple but skilled way. So that's craftsman, artisan, that conflation between craftsperson, that conflation between those things, perhaps that might be it. But I think that there are a lot of chocolate makers who haven't mastered the craft of chocolate making. So they may not be as skilled as they need to be. I don't know if that's controversial to you or not. But having tasted a lot of craft chocolate, I've tasted a lot of chocolate that was technically not up to scratch. And so that would again, it suggests that it's made in a skilled way, but it's not necessarily true that it's made in a skilled way. There seems to be something exciting and desirable about something being made in a natural and unique way, because the craft movement has grown in epic proportions in recent years. And that is true. Craft beer, but there are a lot of things. I don't hear craft wine very much. I don't hear craft vinegar very much. I hear more artisan when it comes to things like olive oils. Craft. So it's interesting. Craft coffee, maybe, but it's an interesting thing to consider. I want to jump from here and say we're about halfway through. We're here at the Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon, and today on the Chocolate Life Live, we're talking about innovation awards and trends and how they relate to each other or perhaps influence each other. I'm here today talking about that because I'm going to be at the Fancy Food Show for the first time in 3 years over the weekend. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. And I'm really, really happy to have had the opportunity to put together this live stream and focusing on the research, which is going to focus me for the first time I've actually been to a trade show. This is the largest event I will have attended. There'll be more people in one place at one time than at any point in the past 3 years. And it's going to be interesting for me to see how I react. I was at Grand Central. I was at Penn Station. I've been, I've been to airports. I have not been surrounded by a lot of people. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how I feel. I'm not quite sure how I feel about it, but it's going to be interesting to see how that works. So I want to jump from here into another awards program. It's called the Mindful Awards. And the Mindful Awards, they talk about their mission. Let's go to the homepage. They talk about what their mission is and honor conscious CPG, consumer products companies, and the products that stand up for what's right. They recognize what's good and transparent, fair, natural, organic, sustainable, all the things that we want to hear, right? So, very, very interesting in terms of what it is that they're looking to do. One of the challenges I have is the number of categories that are involved. I mean, this is just an enormous number of categories to give awards to. I have an interesting challenge in the sense that we have no idea who the judges are. So when they talk about transparency, as near as I can tell, there's a near complete and total lack of transparency in the way the awards are judged. We don't know who the judges are. We don't know the actual rubric of judging. So what criteria are considered to be the most important? If there are weighting criteria, how that works. We have some general categories. We're concerned about impact, the transparency of the company itself, even though the awards are not transparent, innovation. But they don't talk about what innovation means to them. And this is one of the points that I want to make when it comes to putting together judging programs and awards programs. When you talk about best, what is it that you're valuing? So one of the things that's interesting about the marketplace, right, is we come in here, and so this is the gold award in the Sophie. So it is considered to be the single best product. They're looking, I think, primarily at taste and then the accessibility to the larger marketplace. Is this something that the specialty foods community buyers are going to want? So I think those are the two primary criteria here, although it's not entirely clear. We don't know specifically who the judges are. We don't know exactly what the judging process is. And here we have the same kind of thing. We don't know what the metrics are for impact. We don't know what the metrics are for innovation. We don't know them for any of these things. This is an interesting, how credible is the company? Oh, wow, that's a really, really interesting concept. I'm actually thinking about seeing if I can be a judge in the chocolate category for next year, just so that I can understand how this whole process works. But we'll see. Award winners this year, really, really interesting. We'll go through, and as I said, there are a lot of awards. So leadership, really, really interesting. So they're talking about mindfulness specifically. So the Mindful Awards. So we have, right, a personality company. DTC would be direct to consumer, innovation, startup. So, I mean, these are really, really interesting ways of thinking about it. One of the challenges I have is if I go and I click on this, what they're going to do is they're going to send me to this company's website. And I don't actually know for any of these companies why they were chosen. We don't get any indication of why was this particular company chosen to be. So we know that it is a mix of these criteria, right? But we don't know specifically what about these criteria with respect to these companies are the reasons that the judges chose them. And I think that's a real opportunity lost in terms of understanding it. Yay, Mindful Awards, all this kind of stuff. I can put it in a product. I learned about this because Heather Terry, who's been a guest here on the Chocolate Life Live, is the co-founder of this company, Good Sound Foods, and they won Chocolate Product of the Year. One of the challenges, however, is this takes me to their website, and I don't actually know which specific product was actually given the award. Is it the chocolate product line of the year? Interesting, could be. But there's a lot to be said for, thinking about how we as consumers of these awards need to think about what the awards are about and how they are judged. And specifically, many of these companies, most of the companies have more than one product. And are we rewarding the company, or is there a specific, right, product that was judged in each one of these categories? But I'm going to put a link to this. I mean, all these links are going to be in today's post on The Chocolate Life. So if you head over to thechocolatelife.com, you'll see that there's a post for today on innovation, trends, and awards. If we go to that post, you'll see that there's only the link to one of the pages. It's this one here, the product marketplace. But I'm going to be putting the links to all these other pages so that you're going to be able to go and see them. Excuse me. For yourself and understand what it is that you like or don't like about these. Do you agree with me? Let me know. Put it in the comments, either live while you're here or after the fact. You can put the comments on here. If you are a member of The Chocolate Life, every single one of these posts, has got a comment. You need to be a member to comment. If you're not a member, you can just click on join. And there's always a free tier. If you like what it is that I'm doing here, you can support it financially. I understand that dollars are difficult to come by. I'm not expecting people to support me that way. I do appreciate it. However, the financial support. And there's a list of perks if you go click the join button. And that's the commercial for this part of the live stream. So I want to thank everybody who's been with me for the last half hour and talking about innovation, trends, and awards. So I thought it would be interesting, right, to go to Instagram and find out specifically the search term food innovation. So these are terms that people have attached to their posts. And so what does the world of Instagram think of as innovation? And from, again, and the photos that they use to associate with innovation. So this, it's some sort of jam product. This particular project is about supporting women-owned businesses and how that can be important. And by the way, I think is incredibly important to do that, especially in producing countries. But the innovation, it's not obvious what the innovation is, and maybe that's the purpose. You've got an image. Obviously, a bunch of people have liked this, over 500, and I don't know how many views it has. But it hasn't got any engagement in terms of comments, which is an interesting thing to go look at. I'm looking through here at what it is that's going on. Innovation, interesting. All right, they're talking about, okay, we're talking about an appliance in the home that can be used to grow food. I think that there's going to be a lot of work in what's called in controlled environment agriculture, not just on the personal scale, but industrially. And sure enough, as we come down here, what we'll find is here's another post on controlled environment agriculture, and they're trying to sell this into restaurants, hotels, schools, places like that. In this, they mentioned a zoo. Could be a place where they could grow food. But controlled environment agriculture and innovation around CEA is going to be a huge thing. So it's attracting a lot of investment. The idea being is that the closer you can grow the stuff to where it is consumed, you can, number one, deliver it freshly. You can reduce the carbon footprint by not having transported around. You're not likely to have nationwide recalls of products which are contaminated from single sources. You're reducing the reliance on shipping from overseas, and you can grow things year-round here. So interesting opportunity to think about controlled environment agriculture and systems which are designed to be like in the parking lot right next door to your local big box grocery store. So interesting concept there. But these are the sorts of things that, interestingly enough, you wouldn't get an idea about what food innovation trends are from looking at Instagram. Just I don't see anything here that gives me any kind of idea that the collective wisdom of the crowd knows much about innovation. And I think that one of the reasons why, and it's why I brought this up, is that innovation is really hard. So when I think about innovation in chocolate, right, I'm not thinking of another flavor of chocolate. So I'm not thinking about another producing country, another origin. I'm not thinking about another varietal. I'm not thinking about a new kind of inclusion from a new food culture that we haven't experienced much here in the United States. That's incremental development, right? I don't think of it as innovation. And it's really hard. What it is truly new, right, that you might be doing in cocoa and chocolate hasn't been done a couple of years before, right? And I've made this observation, irrespective of what you think about the labor practices in producing countries that is supported by companies like Barry Callebaut. One of the things which is really interesting about them is they do ask interesting questions. So why does chocolate have to be brown, right? And so how do we go and we keep the natural purplish colors from fresh cocoa beans, which led to the development or the introduction of ruby? That's an interesting question. And the research and development into and around that question led to what I think of as an innovative product. It is a new chocolate product that had never been seen before. Really, really cool. And it wasn't made by adding berry flavor and red coloring to white chocolate. It was a part of an industrial process which resulted in this color and flavor, quote unquote, naturally. Right? And I think it's an example of the kind of thinking and questioning that needs to go in order to be able to make truly innovative product. I'm not making a value judgment on the product itself. I mean, do you like it? Do you not like it? That's a personal decision. I mean, do you want to support the business activities of Barry Callebaut? Your decision. But it's an interesting question. The same thing is also true of their whole fruit line. They were among the first to try to do a product for food service, which was upcycling everything else out of a cocoa pod. So they're rather than capturing juice and getting the juice in a ready-to-drink format, so in an aseptic container, a Tetra Pak, or a glass bottle or something like that, what they're doing is, let's go and see if we can make a concentrate that we can put in the hands as a flavoring for mixologists or for pastry chefs. Right? Interesting kind of concept in terms of upcycling the pulp and the juice. Can we take the pod? Can we convert the pod into a flour? They're not the first people to do it. They may be the first people to do it at scale. And they're actually thinking about one of the things which is innovative about this. Again, I think about these things perhaps slightly different for many people. The thing that's interesting is that if we can invest $100 million into a processing plant, which isn't just focused on drying cocoa beans for export, right? Or fermenting and drying cocoa beans for export. But what we're looking to do is we're looking to figure out, can we take the entire fruit, so the pod, and then get as little waste as possible out of it? And then what are the kinds of jobs that are associated with? So, in this community, my choices were become a farmer like my parents or go to the big city. Now what I might be able to do is I might do a job as a truck driver. I might be able to get a job working inside the plant. I could go to school and come back and be an engineering manager in the plant. And so all of a sudden what you've done is you've rethought the economy of the local community. And in many respects, that's a lot more interesting and innovative than trying to figure out how to increase productivity by 10%. Right? These farmers are not in control of the price for their product. In Ghana, for example, that price is controlled by the government. And the only way they can increase their income compared with their neighbors is by making more, by growing more and selling more. Right? But they're not in control of the price. They're not in control of buying and selling. They're not in control of any of that. And so by coming in and saying, can we rethink the entire economy, right, and get it away just from exporting an agricultural commodity? And when you're exporting an agricultural commodity, what you're doing is you're exporting the nutritional value of the soil. And so I think that one of the things which needs to be done, if what you're going to be doing is you're going to be selling pod flour, for example, is that you need to find a way to replace the nutritional component of the pod, which is normally allowed to decompose in the farm, right? And that represents one of the most significant forms of fertilizer for many cocoa farmers. You need to replace that nutritional value. And so it's really interesting dynamic. But it's thinking about these things in very different ways. And I've talked about this in the past. It's not enough to think outside the box. You need to forget what boxes are. And I think the true innovation comes from either forget what the boxes are, or a colleague of mine, a woman by the name of Ellie Klaus, says you have to deny the existence of boxes. So absolutely. And I don't actually see anything here which strikes me as being truly innovative. There's nothing new. There's nothing here that says I'm thinking about anything new and in a different kind of way. And so I'm disappointed. I don't necessarily know that I would come to Instagram to get any sort of sense for what innovation meant. And maybe none of you is surprised. None of you are surprised. None of you is surprised. Interesting thing. I was thinking about umami. So when I'm thinking about Asian influence, I'm thinking about umami. There's actually a company that's going to be exhibiting at the Fancy Food Show, and they're going to be introducing a new umami flavoring. And this is something that there's always been one or two or three companies that have umami products, whether it is a powder that you can pour onto something, whether it is a liquid that you can put onto something. They derive from different sources. It was really, really interesting to see. I personally think that thinking about umami in carefully introduced into chocolate is something that hasn't really been done well. I don't know that I've seen it done really, really well yet. Maybe they're doing it in Japan. I would expect it to be done in Japan one way or another, because the whole concept comes from there. But I'm looking through this and I'm going, here are things that are associated with umami, and how would I introduce them into chocolate? And so here's one, right? Mushroom salt, not, yeah, why not? I mean, earthiness in mushrooms sometimes is a flavor that you find in chocolate naturally. Often it's a negative flavor attribute, a defect, but it can be a really, really interesting flavor. So I would think about mushroom salt because I love salt in chocolate. And there are lots of ways to do it. But here's also a togarashi. So togarashi is a Japanese seasoning blend. It's often thrown on top of ramen. And so it has got usually some sesame seeds, some chili pepper, and other flavoring. Some might have some seaweed flakes and salt in it. So I'm going, yeah, togarashi mushroom salt, I could see that in the right chocolate. So, even though this company is not going to be at the fancy food show, if I'm thinking about, how would I like to do something new and interesting with chocolate, going through a category like umami and saying, so there's a company in Taiwan, maybe not Taiwan, Fasa, and they have a chocolate that has got an egg flavor in its name. So eggs in chocolate sounds really, really silly, but I can see how that might work. And I hope you can see how that might work. We know that it does work. So if I can have a very creamy egg brulee, creme brulee, or something with a creme anglaise, something which has got a lot of egg in it, right? And chocolate goes with it. So those egg yolk flavors go really well. We know that chocolate goes with egg whites. So it's not really as silly as people think about. And then how would I do an umami flavor in there? For example, can you do anchovies and chocolate? It's possible to do. And if anybody wants to put in the comments, how would you do anchovies and chocolate? And if you've heard me ask this question before and you know what I would answer, please don't put in the comments. But how would you look to do anchovies and chocolate? And I'll remember to do that before the end. We got a couple of minutes before we go. So this is I think a really, really interesting approach. How I got from innovation to trends to awards, looking at flavors, and then looking at Instagram, and then finding sources of inspiration for how I might incorporate some of these flavors. I think really, really, really interesting. Another category that's going to be huge that I might look at, certainly something big at the Fancy Food Show, is sustainable packaging. I don't see anything here which really strikes me as new information, but you never know when it might show up as, I hadn't thought about this before. Lots of interesting shapes, interesting colors. They're talking about interesting applications, but this represents a way of using Instagram, relatively new to me, that I think is really quite remarkable, and I would go and take a look at. Couple of other things to think about when it comes to innovation. So I've talked about this before. I wrote an article about it. Here's a company in Koa. I believe they're in Berlin. They're in Germany. And what they're doing is they're using fermentation to develop a replacement for cocoa. Now, there are a lot of people who are fundamentally against this, because what does it mean for farmers, right? If we're converting so if we're upcycling waste, for example, from brewing and using it as an input for fermentation for developing a chocolate replacement, and then we can ferment not only the non-fat part of it, but the lipids associated with it. So we can ferment a specific lipid as a cocoa butter equivalent or a cocoa butter replacement. I mean, that's a really, really interesting kind of thought. But can we create a circular economy, which is local, right, for niche applications? I think there's a really, really interesting opportunity here. I don't know if they'll be commercially successful or not, but that's not my point. What they're doing is they're saying, is this something we can do? And they might learn some really, really important things as a result of doing this that leads to other applications. And so I'm really, really excited about what it is that's going on here, and suggest that you might want to go take a look at it as well, or follow it, or if you have an idea about what you think about fermenting chocolate or lab-grown chocolate. So there are people who are looking at culturing chocolate as opposed to fermenting it. Interesting. When it comes to lab grown, this company is going to be at the Fancy Food Show. I'm really interested in giving a chance to taste what it is they're doing. And they are in fact culturing tuna, but they're culturing tuna not from tuna. They're using fungus, koji and algae and other things like that in order to be able to create a tuna replacement. So I'm really excited about the thought of tasting it. Why? No heavy metals, no microplastics, none of the things that we think about. The dangers of eating fish from the environment. So really, really cool. I'm really looking forward to having an opportunity to taste that over the course of the next couple of days. And then finally, from something I wanted to talk about, because it's related to chocolate. And this is a conversation that Spencer Hyman at Cocoa Runners and I have had over the course of several years at Chocoa, and which is that there is no, so if I think about drinking coffee, if I think about drinking wine, if I think about other kinds of foods, there are times of day, there are occasions, there are rituals associated with most of those foods, and all of them. And it's one of the reasons why they are successful. But chocolate doesn't have a specific ritual. It doesn't have a time of day. When you think about how beer is consumed, or in the UK, as Spencer has talked, how the patterns of consumption actually altered how wine was sold into the UK market, and what specific kinds of wines were created to fill the UK market. I mean, it's a very, very interesting, fascinating, conversation. And there's nothing like that in chocolate, which is interesting. And so I saw this and I'm going, and there's a video here. I'm not going to play it because I can't get the audio, but there is a video here. Do you still make tea this way? And you can watch it if you want. Again, I'll put the link in the post today. And it never really occurred to me that the notion of, getting out a pot and putting a spoonful, I mean, I never obsessed about it. I'm an American. Americans don't have the same relationship with tea that many other cultures do. But so how can we address this problem? Well, let's just take the tea and compress it into discs. And then what we can do is, one disc in 1 cup of water, or 1 disc or 2 discs in a pot of water. And I don't have to obsess over whether I've got the right amount of water or the right amount of tea. Interesting. But what they did with it, I think, is really, really interesting, because what they did is they created a humidor. So here is a device, right, that holds my little tea discs. Really, right? And I can carry them around with me. So if I'm a real tea person, I can put this in my luggage and I can take it with me wherever it is that I go. And not only that, but this tea humidor has got an accessory, and that tea accessory is something that you spray inside the humidor in order to maintain the correct moisture balance of the humidor so that your tea discs age. Aging tea, I can buy a tea, put it in my humidor, and it will improve over time. Really, really interesting. But notice, I mean, this tea disc humidor, I mean, $87. I mean, wow. I mean, this is not an inexpensive thing, right? But it enables me to create a ritual, all right? I've got my own, I mean, it's really, really smart, right? And they're solving a problem that I never considered to have, because I don't worry about it. I like tea. I'm a good tea drinker. I've been to tea salons. I've had tea tastings, and for those of you who are into tea, you know that sometimes tea can cost hundreds of dollars an ounce, thousands of dollars a pound, and so it makes sense. I mean, the entire Japanese tea ceremony. I mean, it's like, this is an amazing culture, all of which is missing in chocolate, and that's one of the challenges. But this is an interesting way. I have no idea if they'll be successful. I'm not a tea drinker. Nobody in my family is a tea drinker. If I knew somebody who was a tea drinker, I might consider purchasing this as a gift. But one of the things which I think is really interesting is all of these different categories of teas. So I'm more of a smoke. Lapsang Souchong. I like chai tea blends, none of which is here. But I'm looking. They've got a bunch of different oolong teas, and I'm looking at what I think is the darkest one, Midnight Magic. But these are 12 discs for $18. So it's $1.50 per. So I'm thinking about getting 20 tea bags for $3, going from 15 cents to $1.80. That's pretty amazing. lot of packaging for 12T discs, so that I am not really a fan of. But it's a real interesting concept, and I think it's quite an innovative approach. Again, not aimed at me as a consumer, but I think that what they've done is they've taken something and they haven't just thought about the product itself. And I think this is the key. They haven't thought about just the product itself, but they thought about the process of consuming it and the mindset of consuming it and what it is that they want to do. And they've built an entire ecosystem around it. And they've said, you know, people aren't always consuming this at home. They do travel. I mean, if anybody's watched James Hoffman videos, if you haven't watched James, you should watch his channel on YouTube. Talk about coffee. I mean, the number of people who obsess of traveling with, you know, portable espresso machines and hand grinders and coffee so they can have good coffee wherever they go in the world. I mean, you know, not me, but there are certainly a lot of people who do that. And so I think that it's really smart. I mean, it is really, really, really smart, and represents the kind of forget what boxes are thinking in terms of and applying it to a category. And I really, really do love it for that. I don't think they're at the Fancy Food Show. If they are, I'm going to go take a look at them and see what it is that they have to say, and just, you know, report back. Maybe show you what a disc looks like if I get that opportunity. And that's today. That's the end of today. We're an hour past. And what I want to do is go and say, all right, what is the way I would do anchovies and chocolate? And the way I would do that is I would do battered French fries. And in the batter for the French fries, I would put cocoa powder. So I got a cocoa powder battered French fry. And then I'd make an anchovy aioli. And I dip the battered French fries into the anchovy garlic mayonnaise. And I think that's a way that you can combine anchovies and chocolate. And with that, I want to say, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. And we will be back here on Tuesday with a follow-up to this program and innovation, where I'm going to be sharing my experience with what I saw, bring back some products, taste them, be able to share them with you online on Tuesday. And until then, everyone, have a great weekend and enjoy your chocolate.